take the hard transition here, Brennan, and let's talk about one Michael Gambon, who unfortunately passed away last week, September 27th, I believe it was. And Michael Gambon is one of those actors. He is primarily known in the theatrical space.
Yeah.
However, when it comes to movies, there is one role that he is most notable for. And that is, of course, in the Harry Potter franchise, playing the great Dumbledore. And
he didn't start out that way.
Did not start out that way. He's certainly played some other roles for sure.
No, but I mean, he didn't even kickstart the role of Dumbledore.
Yeah, in the third movie.
So he had a hard task.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. And we can certainly get into all of that. In some of his other movies, even outside of Harry Potter as well, because he's been in some other very good movies and had some other great performances for sure. However, where it's not often that we hear this kind of news all the time, obviously. And sometimes it's touching. It's, you feel a little sadness when you hear someone pass away that you're very familiar with because of their artistry.
Yeah.
It is more rare for me to feel the full sting of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Michael Gambon, the news of him passing gutted me last week when I first heard the news. And this is all your fault.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I knew this was coming. You texted me this offline, so I knew this was coming.
This is all Brendan's fault, okay? Because I haven't felt that kind of sting since probably Robin Williams. And that was, 2015, 16, 17?
Oh, no, that was before that, I think.
Was it before that? 2014?
I think so. I think it was 2014. It was August of 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd say that
Robin Williams has been gone for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And Philip Seymour Hoffman, that's the other big one.
That's
that
another
one
big one. Yeah.
Still continues to sting for sure.
Yeah.
Those two. I haven't felt the full impact of a celebrity death like that in close to 10 years. This one gutted me. And I jokingly point the finger at Brendan, but the reality is, and I guess, tell this story once again for any new listeners out there. I did not grow up with Harry Potter like Brendan did. I did not watch these movies or read the books in real time. I caught up with them much, much later, specifically in 2014, I believe it was. Brendan comes on the show in early 2014. And sometime that year, he tells me, no, I think you should watch Harry Potter. They're genuinely good movies. You should watch them.
Yeah, because at that time, you technically had seen them all, but you sort of half saw them all, right?
Yeah, I don't even know if I had seen them all. I know I had seen some of them, and I couldn't have told you a single thing about them. I did not pay attention, did not care. I had seen them because of an ex-girlfriend that really liked them, and she would put them on when we were together.
So at that point, you probably ignorantly thought they were just like another Twilight or something like that.
Yeah, I simply chalked it up to, I don't know, like a child's movie, I guess.
Okay.
And I'm at that point, I'm in college.
Yeah.
Kind of near the end of college. And in terms of my cinephiledom, like, I'm really starting to come into my own in that regard.
Yeah.
So I'm watching a lot of different movies that were pushing the boundaries as far as my experience with cinema goes.
Right, right.
So that was where I was at that time.
Gotcha.
And so, like, I didn't really pay, like, I had felt certainly myopically.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I was maybe a little bit pretentious in this regard. I'm willing to admit that.
We all were at that age,
But
right?
yeah, because I was trying to take myself a little bit seriously, I guess, as a cinephile, right? Like I'm
Yep.
wanting to watch Tarantino and Nolan and Scorsese, you know.
You were above Harry Potter.
I was above Harry Potter. I had outgrown my Lion King, you know,
Until you
childhood
start
thing.
watching him, you realize, no, Harry Potter's above me.
Yeah. Look, and that was where I was in college. And even
Yeah.
at that time, because this is like 2007, 8, not even all the films had come out.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, I didn't really pay attention to, you know, that, you know, relationship ends and that was it as far as my Harry Potter connection goes.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not watch any of them, hadn't read the books. Brendan suggests that I give them a go.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this is 2014. So this is also like 7-8 years past that college pretentious phase. I had matured a little bit as well.
You're starting to find that open-mindedness that we tend to promote on this show.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to be open-minded when doing the reviews or talking about art in general. And that started in 2013 and matured even more into 2014. So when Brendan suggests Harry Potter, I was very much open to it. And, you know, he was very passionate about his suggestion. He thought that I would love them.
Yeah.
So in 2014, with really no, from my perspective anyway, I went in pretty much blind. I didn't really know anything.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know what to expect. And it's funny because earlier tonight, this is a weird little tie-in. My wife and I were talking with our oldest son, and he was wanting to play a game where you make up a bunch of questions, you know, like a what if scenario. You know, would you rather have this or would you rather have that kind of a thing?
Right.
And my wife asked me, so it came to my turn, and she says, is there a movie that you would love to watch again for the first time? Is what she says. This happened literally just a few hours ago.
Okay.
And sitting here talking about this specifically, that experience in 2014 with Harry Potter is my answer to that question.
Wow. And not just the first movie, like you mean the whole franchise.
Whole thing.
Yeah.
The whole thing. Like Brennan suggests that I watch them and I could not turn it off. Mm-hmm. If I could have gone through them all back to back and not sleep or eat, I would have done it.
Wow.
Like I was
You binged them. You binged them. Yeah.
I binged them. In like a week's time, I binged them all and I fell in love with them. Fell in love with those movies.
I think that was the moment when you realized, oh, I brought this guy on for a good reason. He knows his shit.
It was a bonding experience for Brennan and I, that's for sure.
Because it's like that was my resume to prove, hey, guess what? I could actually be a decent critic on this podcast.
Yeah, and then we ended up doing the Harry Potter series later on that year, I believe, or it might have been the next year. It was soon afterwards.
It was close. Yeah.
But that week of watching them, binging them for the first time was one of my favorite experiences since doing this show. I absolutely loved them. And since then, you know, it's funny because speaking of my oldest, he was born in 2015. The week he's born, my mother comes down to help us with the new baby. And I'm a brand new father at this point. So she, of course, wants to come down and help. What do we do in that first week? We binge all of the Harry Potter movies because my mom had never seen them before. So she got to have that experience.
So all of a sudden it's a special place in the Duran household now.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Now imagine growing up with them like I did, where each year or maybe each 2 years, you got a new movie and it was an event. It was a very different experience, but seeing them in real time as they came out was, and for me, I had read the books as well. So I actually caught up with the books a little bit later. The movies are what turned me into a fan. It was the first movie, which I loved back in 2001. That's why it still ended up in my top 20 of 2001 during a retrospective, because it is admittedly one of the worst movies in the franchise. But it's still really good just because of that relationship I have with it. But that's the movie that made me go back and retroactively start reading the book series. So I started behind the books, and then as I went, I was I was ahead of everything. So it was an interesting reversal, but still, every time a movie came out, it was this charming event, this magical event, and it was the excitement of going to see them is something I feel like we don't see that much in movies anymore. Just like that build up to a franchise that's 10 years in the making, and each time one comes out, it's a special thing, thing.
For sure, absolutely, and so
although I will say, sorry to cut you off, but the fact that you binge watch them all like that. In many ways, it's almost like you got to see Richard Linklater's Boyhood before Boyhood even came out.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you kind of, with each film, you see them grow up a little bit. In a lot of ways, it was watching an elongated, magical version of Boyhood for sure.
Yeah.
And it was a great time, as I noted. Fast forward to this last summer. And of course, in between time, I've watched the films many more times as well. And then it comes this last summer. And also, let me throw in the caveat before I get into this, because it might get a little prickly. I do not agree with JK's politics at all. A lot of people completely loathe her.
Yeah,
and
I understand.
Will not put any money into the Harry Potter franchise because they want her to go away. And I understand that wholly.
Yeah.
I empathize with that. When I talk about Harry Potter, it's really the material itself. And maybe that it's a little hard to disassociate her completely as a writer and, how she conjured this universe. I think if we're removing the artist from the art, I guess that's what I'm doing here. And I'm just talking about the material itself, not the artist. Because I do not agree with JK's politics at all. So just for whatever that's worth, I know she's controversial, and I wanted to throw that a caveat out there because I had never read the books.
Yeah.
I love the movies, but I had never read the books. So this summer, I decided to read them. And for our Patreon listeners, they're very attuned to this because I talked about this a lot in our exclusive Patreon episodes. If you want to go and check any of that out, patreon.com/InSessionFilm. But I read the books this last summer and I loved them. Again, just being in that world, seeing the differences from the movies, the characters, and how rich I think they are. And of course, Dumbledore is one of those great characters. And I've always loved Michael Gambon's depiction of the character. Very different from Richard Harris, who brings a warmth to the character that I think is really necessary for the first two Harry Potter films, since the kids are much younger and they need that warmth. I think it fits that tone very well for the first two. And that while the passing of Richard Harris is sad in its own right, I think it worked out where Michael Gambon could bring something new to Dumbledore that was tonally more appropriate for the latter films. And I love what he brings to the character. And we can certainly talk about some of the specifics of that here in a moment.
Yeah.
But that is to say, reading the books over the summer only made me fall in love with the character more. And as I would go through the books, when Dumbledore, when it was about Dumbledore, it was Gambon's face that I was seeing.
Yeah.
And picturing in my mind.
For sure.
Which is to say, I've been in a Harry Potter mood all year. I watched the films, funny enough, earlier in the year.
Yeah.
On my own back in January because I was itching to rewatch them again. It had been a little while. And then some friends of mine who I've talked about here on the show a couple of times that aren't in this space with me. And they had never seen them before.
Yeah.
And so I was like, sure, I had just watched them. Let's go through them again. You guys had never seen them?
I never need an excuse.
I did it. My mom did it. I want you guys to have that experience as well. So I showed them and they got to have that experience. And then, of course, I got to read the book. So I've been in this world a lot this year. So it's a little weird, a little ironic that that Michael Gambon is one of the artists that we lose this year.
Mm-hmm.
So it stung. It hit me pretty hard. And I get the news while I'm on my way to work.
Oh,
so I'm already.
So you had the best day of work ever.
Well, and it's I won't go into it, but there's been some melodrama at work lately.
Okay.
That has it makes going to work a little weird over the last few weeks or so.
Okay, fair enough.
So, so the news compounded with that just makes for a strange morning.
Gotcha.
But the context of Harry Potter in my experience this year was enough that I was pretty devastated by the news. So by the time I get there, I'm feeling a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess as a way to grieve, the first thing I did when I sat down at my desk is I watched the clip from Deathly Hallows Part 2, the scene of Snape's memories.
Okay.
And the back and forth that we see between Snape and Dumbledore talking about Harry and how they feel about him, the importance of Harry, and why he eventually has to die.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite scenes in the book. Something Brennan and we talked about for like 30 minutes on a Patreon episode not too long
Apparently
ago.
We're a book podcast now.
I love the moment in the book and I love the moment in the film.
Yeah.
And it's, of course, doubly poignant now because of Alan Rickman's passing some time ago. So you have those two in the scene going toe-to-toe, these two phenomenal actors, and I sobbed the entire 4 minutes.
You're adorable.
Totally undone by it. I just love Michael Gambon as that character. I know he's been great in other movies, and we can certainly talk about them.
Oh, yeah.
But as is the case with a lot of other people, it's his depiction of Dumbledore, I think, will be it's left an imprint on me. It's just part of the nerdy part of me now, and I'll never forget what the experience of Harry Potter for me, going back to 2014 that first time, and then falling in love, and then going through the books. Definitely gonna be missed for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like I said in the opening of this entire conversation, Michael Gambon had the hardest task ahead of him by replacing the great Richard Harris, who had provided the blueprint for the character. And Richard Harris, you're right, did bring that warmth that was necessary for those first two films, but he also really looked the part as far as how Dumbledore was sort of illustrated in pre-existing material leading up to the making of the movies. So he was very much a carbon copy of a sorts of what the visualization of Dumbledore was, according to J.K. Rowling. Whereas Michael Gambon, when he took over for Prisoner of Azkaban, he portrayed the character a little bit differently. Not to the point that it felt like a different character, but there was a more forceful energy to him, kind of a wit to him, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of a snarkiness to him at times.
Yeah.
And that would eventually change. So, of course, we see him as Dumbledore because he had the most films to create an arc out of. But that's unfair to compare him to Richard Harris in that regard, but it still doesn't change the fact that Michael Gambon was up for the challenge when he took over in that third movie and turned the character into what we think of today with regard to Dumbledore. It's why I have a hard time watching these Fantastic Beasts movies, seeing Jude Law in the role, because I just want to try and find Michael Gambon, and I can't see it.
Yeah, seriously, fairly or unfairly, that's how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's been fascinating to see the response to this as well on social media because, and I guess let me first say that the death of Dumbledore is one of the best moments in the movies and in the book as well. Not just because it's a character that we know that is killed, how he's killed and the context that is ultimately revealed certainly adds weight to it.
For sure.
But the main reason it's so effective is because we had come to love that character so deeply. Why? Well, it's the portrayal of him. The writing certainly helps for sure. And I love the writing of the character. But what Gambon brings to him is so magnetic, so warming. And his relationship with Harry throughout the films is so good that the film really earns that moment emotionally.
Yeah.
Regardless of the score and the moment that takes place afterwards. The death of him alone is effective because of Gambon's performance. And then there's the visual of what happens when everyone at Hogwarts circles the body and they raise their wands and you get this beautiful score. I'm trying to remember the composer.
That might be Nicholas Hooper you're thinking of for that
Hooper?
one.
Yeah, I
Nicholas
remember.
Hooper scored the 5th and 6th movie.
The 5th and 6th. Okay.
Yeah,
that cue is just incredible. It's really fantastic. So it was interesting.
Where is Nicholas Hooper nowadays? And I don't mean to get on a side tangent, but he was a pretty dang capable composer. I wonder what else has he worked on.
Yeah, and we can certainly get to that here in a moment. But I do want to finish that thought by saying it was fascinating to scour social media this week, particularly on TikTok. There was a bunch of videos going viral where, people were at Harry Potter World in Universal here in Florida, and they'd be, raising their wands and doing some sort of salute to the character, which I thought was pretty charming. And it was I went down that rabbit hole quite a bit that night, or in the next day or so after the news had dropped. But